Milchama with Amalek, now he's explaining the significance of remember. Don't forget. What does remember? So remember means something that you knew and you forgot. Where does it go? How's it possible it disappears? The answer is it doesn't disappear. The answer is that something that you forgot simply recedes to deeper parts of the moyach, all the way down to the koyach hamaskil, but it's there. He pointed out the example of the erase button. When you erase something from your computer, it doesn't disappear. It just externally disappears, but it's there, much more subtle, deeply embedded, as it were. Once there, never disappears. It's always retrievable. So likewise, so what's the point over here? That the etzem nefesh. So where do you forget? You forget where in conscious seichel havana vasaga can forget, but the etzem nefesh doesn't forget, and that's the whole point here. That the whole milchama, remember. So you have to remember. Where do you draw on to remember? You draw on that place of the nefesh where there's no forgetfulness, and that is the koyach hamaskil, from which gave birth to the idea to begin with, that insight, that understanding. And that's what we're saying. That's nefesh, that the milchama against Amalek cannot be. That's the whole point. The avodah of Shaul, it's got to be the avodah of David, but it has to be the avodah of Shaul. I just want to address something that Mordechai said on Shabbos. The Maamer is, God forbid, not dismissing the value of Parshat Rishayna, of Kriya Shema, Adarabah. That's the Ikar Chiyuv, is Parshat Rishayna. But in addition to that, there has to be the perennial, till Mashiach comes, the avodah of Milchama with Amalek. So that is augments in addition to, and critical. So now he's saying, what's the connection to remembering? Meaning, to remember, you have to draw on the etzem neshama, etzem nefesh. That's the avodah of David the Melech, the avodah of Eved, of Bittel, of Hineni, regardless of what the circumstance. Now, we're in the middle of that. And an interesting point coming. So the word v'zeh inyan hazikaron. So we're 2/3 down. I'm sorry, 1/3 down from Eis Yud Beis. Trying to find a reference point. There's no footnotes here to. It's in the middle of the page after the word shinuyim b'chulu. The 3rd down from the top. Yeah. The line
that begins with
koyach hamaskil. Yeah, that's the easiest way to find it. The line begins with koyach hamaskil. So this is what we mean by remember. That is higher than the conscious mind, higher than conscious seichel, where there can be forgetfulness. So where does the memory come from? From the koyach hamaskil. Now a question and answer, which could be like in brackets, but it's fascinating. We see. So what are we saying? We're saying that the power of memory comes from the koyach hamaskil. So we would conclude, therefore, that if someone has a good memory, since where is he drawing on? He's drawing on the koyach hamaskil. He's also very innovative and original thinker, because he is in touch with the koyach hamaskil, and that's where original thoughts come from. Yet the fact is not so. You see that someone who has a good memory is always able to draw on the koyach hamaskil and retrieve things he heard and understood, and yet he's not an intellectual that comes up with new ideas. So l'choda, he should be able to, because new ideas are born from the koyach hamaskil. It's the potential for every idea, as we learned earlier in this Maamer. What? Anybody here remembers? The moshel of the koyach hamaskil was to explain. A single idea from the koyach hamaskil was to explain creation, l'gab b'sevev kalamim. early on in the Maamer. That was the Moishe that he gave for Das Elyon, the beetle of the single idea to the Koyach HaMaskil. At any rate, which can conceive virtually endless ideas, endless subjects, and endless depths of idea. At any rate, the question here is, if a person has a good memory, then we would think, therefore, that he's also an original thinker, because they are both rooted where? In Koyach HaMaskil. Question's clear? The question is clear. Folks, some feedback. Yeah. The Shaila.
Yeah.
So the answer is, we're just going to get the geographical, technical answer without going to Hasbara. The answer is that the power of memory, it's true, it's there in the Koyach HaMaskil, but it's a completely different mocker. In the Koyach HaMaskil itself, there is, he's saying, two abilities, and they're parallel. They both exist in the Koyach HaMaskil, but they're different. And what are the two things? One is the ability to come up with original ideas. The other one is the power of memory. But they're not the same, even though they're in Koyach HaMaskil. The emes is a very deep idea. And what this is saying is, L'mayla, that in the etzem, so if you listen to this, you get some asbara, that in the etzem, there's the koyach hagvul and koyach habli gvul. The koyach of memory is kelim. The koyach of keli, to contain it, the memory. You had an idea and it was expressed in these words, that's the keli. That's the koyach hagvul. The koyach to come up with new ideas is oir, bli gvul. He's saying that in the etzem, the koyach hagvul, the koyach habli gvul are equal and present, but they are not the same. They are opposite potentials. Same. That's the answer here. That both memory and the koyach to produce ideas come from Koyach HaMaskil, so they're parallel, but they're not the same. And just because one has a chush in one doesn't mean one has a chush in the other, because there's two separate inyonim in the Koyach HaMaskil, just like the Koyach HaGvul and Koyach HaBli Gvul. Oir and Keli are two separate inyonim, and in fact they're opposites in many ways, finite and infinite, and yet they all come from the etzem. At a core essential level, it's all there as one. We're not talking etzem mamish, we're talking Koyach HaMaskil, which would be, the parallel l'mayl would be al derech etzem ha'oir. We've talked about this, we're not going to go into the protim. Etzem is almost a contradiction in terms. If you're talking about oir, so it's not etzem, but there is the gather of etzem oir. Whereas where the etzem lends itself to expression, but not fully manifest yet, and moved away from the non-expressive, essential, indivisible state, which is the etzem mamish. If you got that, good. If not, it's okay. It's not something to gear to the Maamer here. To have the hasbara. Avalhu, continuing, again, the power of memory is tak in the Koyach HaMaskil, but it's a separate talent, separate from the intellectual capacity to come up with novel ideas. Aval, it's equal to it on one level. Why? Because both come from the Koyach HaMaskil. To translate that the way it works, the Maila, which is kind of easy to understand, both the Koyach HaBli Gvul and the Koyach HaGvul, Oir and Keli, all come from Atzmos equally, even though they're opposite and different manifestations, which is the meaning of Havaya Hu Alikim. Hu Atzmos, Havaya Oir, Alikim, Gvul, it's all him. But they're different. Sheheim ba'oise erech v'yachas l'etzem ha'nefesh, relative to the etzem ha'nefesh, they're both Atzmis dike koyches. They're both rooted in etzem ha'nefesh. Memory, which is to contain the idea, which is like Keli, and the idea to produce new ideas, which is Oir, they are both in etzem ha'nefesh. Okay, that's like in parenthesis. So it's all to say that, was that somewhat clear? This is not new, basic ideas. Okay. So, close brackets. There's all to explain that the avodah of Amalek requires zocher, remember, do not forget. I think it still is. It's the clarion call of the Holocaust memorials. Remember. So just in print, I'm just going to comment here because someone brought it up to me the other day that one of the traditional, I don't know how to describe this world, the traditional Jewish world, whatever, that has the Holocaust remembrance days, etc., what have you. So they're upset with the Orthodox world that doesn't participate in these things. I'm not going to go into why not. It's very obvious why not, but based on what I just feel right now, is because in the Orthodox world, it's not forgotten that you have to remember and make a day that we're going to remember the Holocaust. Remember what once was. There was a Poland, there was a shtetl, and it was all wiped out. So we have to make a special day to remember the Zayde, the Baba, and what they looked like, and how they lived. Because why? Because tragically, on a conscious level, we're just not in that world anymore. So we have to remember what was. But if you don't forget that you're living this one hemshich drawn on the Koach HaMaskil, the etzem hanefesh, it's one hemshich. It's not a remembrance day. Who forgot? Who forgets? Our children bear their names. Our children are called Yitzchak and Moishe and Berel and Yankel. They're living, and they live the same life that they lived. It's going to come together and make a ceremony and light candles. And then go back to a world that our grandparents and great-parents would be and are pained with, shamed with. I mean, I'm speaking openly, but that's the material. Not that I would say this to anybody. But what really does bother me is the insistence that you have to remember like we do. You have to do it like we do it. That's the truth is, where does it come from? It's very unfair, but I can't remember in my way. I have to do dafka your day. You decided this day and make a ceremony and poems and songs and light candles. That's the only way to do it. I mean, it's other ways. Why the insistence? The insistence is because they want to be one with everybody. We want to feel that we're all one people and that this is the big day that we make. So it hurts us you're not there. So what's the answer? Come to shul, Shabbos. Every day is remember, come in the morning, put on film. That's the answer. We don't want to do that. We're going to have a ceremonial day and you should come over. We want achdus because we feel we're all one, but we want achdus on our terms. Close brackets. It's important to know you have to have klarkeit in kop. You have to have clarity in your head. Doesn't mean you have to express it the way I did now. This is between us. The person has to have clarity in his head. What's the issues on everything? As much as possible. Chassidus gives us that, especially the Rebbe does, in the thousands of letters having addressed every subject. There's no subject in the world where there isn't a clear Torah perspective. Especially in the Igros, the Rebbe's letters. We addressed every question, every concern. It's a treasure trove that has not been mined at all. Slowly, they're distilling it.
There's from now until Yud Nissen, Chase is doing every night, 30 days, 30 letters. It's every night, every day.
Yeah, that's a good step. A good step in the right direction. Yeah. Okay, so what's the in avoida this remembering zikaron? There is the avoida of understanding, of conscious seichel, of appreciation, which inspiration. Shizui avoida the parsha in the Kriyashma, as we explained at length. This is the avoida of the first parsha of Kriyashma. Shema Yisrael, understand. A Jew understands, and that is necessary. Understanding is necessary to bring about the fulfillment of the obligation of the as we said, you cannot love anything or anybody or anyone if you're not familiar, you don't share, you don't understand. And we are commanded to love God, so that means you've got to get to know Him. And that's the first parsha of the Shema. And that's how the Avodah begins. All based on the Meidani in the morning, but the Avodah, the Meidani is a declaration, but the Avodah starts off with understand, we have to get inspired for God's sakes. And that's critical. The given but it has its limitation. Since it's all based on by inspiration, by understanding. Are we always inspired? No. And we always understand? No. So yes, but doing the cut as a godless. So this it fluctuates. What's what I'm looking for? Not what it fluctuates. Huh? No. It means it comes back on itself. Shinuyim means changes. Another word for fluctuate. And Rabbi does katnas, the godless, there's small times and there's godless big times sometimes. There's small and big, meaning he understands well, he doesn't understand well, he's inspired a lot, inspired a little. So this has its ups and downs, shinuyim. The whole maspik and all this avodah is necessary. It's necessary and critical, but it's sufficient only what it will deal with is the emotions of the heart, which will be drawn without avoid in the wrong places. Shem zayin midas harois, the 7 bad or selfish midas from chesed down to Yesod, corresponding to the 7 nations, Knani, Achiti, and so on. So in order to combat and transform them, you got to be inspired. That's the first parsha of the Shema. The second parsha of the Shema is dealing not with the 7 emotions of the heart, but with Amalek, who's just stubborn resistance. He knows, he understands, he can teach it better. He doesn't have the problem of changes of up and down in Seichel. He knows it all. But what? Just dismisses it. Which means he relegates it to the Koyach HaMaskal, fouls it away there in his head, and it's not Negeir. But in the order to mevatel Amalek, he knows, and he's just opposed. So for him, you got to remember. Remember, he just defined means and avodah that comes from the etzem hanefesh. That's where memory is drawn on. So remember, do not forget. Like the pasuk says, if I will remember you on literally my bed. On his bed? Yeah. Even when a Jew is spiritually in a state of slumber, he's lying, he's sleeping, the mind is not firing, he's not inspired, but he remembers. He remembers he's a Yid and he draws in his Kabbalah's oil and etzem and neshama. I'm a chosid, so I got to do this. Yesh etzlo yin hazikor and mechol ha'toikef. Remembering, that's with its force. That doesn't change. The etzem and the neshama is not subject to change. And why will this combat Amalek? Because the avodah now in combating Amalek is not going to meet him with intellectual arguments, because Amalek says, I know all of it. It's filed away up there. What are you telling me? Things I don't know. I know all this. It doesn't touch me. That's Parsha. That's good for the heart. Amalek doesn't address the heart. This is avodah that's expressed in the second parsha of Shema. As we said earlier in the Maamer, Amalek only attacks when you're inspired. If you're not inspired, he leaves you alone. It's okay, fine. Dafka because you're inspired. That's because you're moved. Dafka because it's Havana Vasaga. Dafka because you understand. Dafka because you came from Har Sinai. Dafka because you came from Yetzias Mitzrayim. As explained, that the whole h't'chk is similar to Amalek. And Amalek came after the whole miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim, but it was flying high. That's when he attacks. If not inspired, he has no qualms, no battle. Keep on going downhill. It's fine. So it's dafka when the person has, to one degree or another, is successful in the avodah of the first parsha of the Shema. He's moved and he's alive. The heart is moved and he demands from himself and he's working on himself. And there's an appreciation of Yiddishkeit and of the gifts of life that he has and everything else. And here comes Amalek and says, don't show up. Don't bother. Or he said before, all the different dargas just cools down the outer, what are getting excited about, or he just makes it, it's just old and becomes a yoke and it's heavy, or he says the biggest clip is start taking pride in that you're a big chassid. That's his deepest weapon. 3 levels we learned early in the Milcham of Amalek. So now comes, what's the answer? Zikaron. Remember, you are Jewish. The Pashat Kipshutai. Not a whole intellectual response. Just remember, hey, one second. I'm a chassid. I'm a yid. What's it? I got to do this. I just got to ignore him. That's the answer. What's required to battle Amalek is the second parsha. Here in the second parsha is the word that does not appear in the first parsha. Eved. He's not an Eved in the first parsha. I mean, inspired is a child. The first parsha is Shaul HaMelech, his Ben, is a son who is inspired to one degree or another, with the ups and downs, but still inspired. The second parsha is critical to meet Amalek head on, and that requires Avodah and Eved. Shezeuing and Avodah is Eved, that's the Avodah of the Eved. Shegam imkoi yoimar loy chafatzti bo chineni, said David HaMelech, to Tzaddik HaKohen, who brought out the Aron to him as he's fleeing Avshalom, a rebellion from within his own ranks, his own child. So Tzaddik came out and said, brought him the Aron. He said, take back the Aron. If I'm going to win this, I'll win. If God wants me, Hineni. If he doesn't want me, Hineni, I'm here. And that's Hineni is the stubborn. V'nitzachim means at all costs. There's no alternative. Mitzad, this is a whole theme of Basilagani mind at the end. Mitzad nitzachem, mitzad netzach shebenefesh. Shalei shayich bo shenoyim. Here, there's no changes from Meshekosov, like Shmuel said to Shaul HaMelech when he said that the kingdom is being torn from you. What's a terrible moment there where he tore Shmuel's cloak. Netzach Yisrael lo yishakeh. The eternal one of Israel will not lie. This is God's decision. The monarchy goes to David. That's the Nekudah. The Nekudah is that your Avodah has its ups and downs. And when it comes to Amalek, you're no match. You failed. The Avodah of Amalek is David. Again, we're not critical of Shaul. It's meant to be. Shaul's Parsha Shoina, and a dramatic end to that in Parsha Shnia. Yeah, clear? Let's conclude those arguments. Yes?
Amalek bothers you only when you're into it.
Amalek only bothers you. Yeah.
She says that's where it says careful about derech. On the derech, it doesn't. Off the derech, it doesn't bother.
Yeah, he made the point here. Yeah, good.
Not going on the derech.
Dafke on the derech. Which is why someone is not on the derech, the avodah is not Kabbalah soil. But it's inspire the kid or the person. There you have to inspire, you have to engage and love, and not come down with.
So in other words, Ava is the normal is the normal thing. But once you're on the track, Yira is the point.
Yeah, it means once you're.
So in other words, the first parsha of Krishma is the Avodas Tzaddik, Ava, to a certain extent. And Mashenkin, the parsha Shniya is a guy who's in the trenches, and he's having difficulties. I mean, he's not having difficulties. He's going his way, and that's where Amalek is krichtarain.
Yeah, but again, the critical point is that Amalek only attacks when you're on the way, when you're inspired.
Correct.
That's the important thing. So take it as a compliment. If they all of a sudden there's this stomach resistance, where's this coming from? Where's this coming from? it's because you're inspired. And here's a little secret, friends, not a secret, is that the bigger the inspiration, the more he's going to kick in. When did Amalek kick in? Dafka after he sees Mitzrayim. Cheta Egel, Dafka after the Matan Torah. Dafka after Matan.
It's a Tanya we've been learning lately.
So yeah, you have to be wary. You have to be wary because people get despondent. And and Amalek is very clever. The person looks at himself, I don't understand. I was so inspired yesterday, 5 minutes ago. And now there's a tremendous resistance, and what's going on? So it's a compliment. Adarabah means you're doing your avodah. That's why Amalek is kicking in now, dafka because you're inspired. That's why the irrational resistance. So don't get despondent. Adarabah. So what's the solution? Parsha Shniya, Zikaron. Just remember, I'm a Yid. Easier said than done, but that's the emes. I'm a Yid, I'm a Chassid, and this is what we do. So you just keep on going. And Amalek doesn't go away. He'll try again. Round 2, perennial midoir lidoir. He'll just change the tactics. But the Milchama will continue.
Yeah, that's Amalika. They try to.
Huh?
Amalika.
Malika separate. Yeah, he tries to separate.
He's Amal Eclipse. Moloch is also where a male material is Amal Kuf. Or he's totally.
Yeah. So in other words, it's. I don't think we find this anywhere else. And Moloch has so many guises at Pirushim, because whatever it takes to bring it down, that's what it is. You're holding on this level, bring it down this way, that way. But Dafka again, when a Yid is already a derech. All right, friends, let's continue. Yisud Gimel. Okay. Reishis gave Amalek v'achadis Oved. So Amalek is the first of all the nations, and his end, he'll be the last to be destroyed. Shegam la'achri shekva nevdu bot la goyim palazayin umois. Even afterward, what he dealt with the heart, all the emotions of the heart of the 7 nations, he's still there, and Dafka there. In the Adan Yeshna Reishis gave Amalek, we still have to deal with it. Not still, Dafka have to deal then with Amalek. He knows. And he intentionally opposes whether it's going to be a coarse, outright rebellion, or, as you said earlier, the different dargis, and was mentioned even more dargis, the darkis, or the most sublime, refined, subtle opposition. He just wants to cool the outer. And don't change anything, keep on going, keep on doing. Wouldn't dare suggest a person changes avodah because he's not going to listen. So how does he get a hold in? Just don't be so excited. It's childish, You're a mature adult, but getting excited. And therefore, that's to be the Mulchama Adidei Kiyum Hatzivoy through remembering. Zocher is Asher Asa Lacham Baderech. He hints at Baderech. Remember what Amalek did to you when you're on the way. Tim Chazecher Amalek, and then the pasuk says, wipe out, erase the memory of Amalek. And God says, I will wipe out this. So I'll do this. You do yours, and I'll do mine, says God. I'll complete the job. The completion the Eibishter does. And so we pale throughout our Veda, Shesof called Sof, that ultimately his end is utter destruction. Because the end will be a Mashiach comes momentarily, that the Milchama of the Eibishter B'Amalek Medoir V'Doir is complete. Ad L'Dora the Mashiach, now generation of Mashiach. Sha'oz Yukurim Hayiyud, and then will be fulfilled the promise of Olam Mishim Bar Tzion, and the saviors will go up to Har Tzion, V'Hoysalav, and Haresov, V'Hoysalav Vayamlucha, and unto Hashem will be the kingdom here on earth. Okay, so I sent you, and you have copies on the table, just the overview of the Maamer. I just read it quickly, just to get the flow. It's on the page, and guys, I sent it. You have it. The Teichen Yonim. There's two kinds of seeing that come from above. The view from above to below is das elyon. What's das elyon? Above is the reality, and below is batul b'mitzias. Then there's the other view, right? Kel deis havaya, which is expressed in the word not ashkofa, but in the word re'iyah. That's melamata l'mayla, das tachten. What's das tachten? Shalamata yesh l'mayla ayin. Here's reality, mitzias, and above is no thing, not something we can experience. Ayin, nothing that doesn't exist. Ayin, it's no thing. Ruchnius elikus, beyond our ken. Hashkifa obeirach es amcha Yisrael. So we're asking the Eibishter to look down. There should be nimshach, the union of das elyon lemata, lemata das elyon. And when that happens, hamshacha the Yisrael dafker lilumas olam. That's the bittul of the umas olam, and hamshachas to Yidden. And that he explains is the whole avodah of Parshat Rishoina, of Kriya Shema. First das tachten, then das elyon. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu is das tachten. Avai Hashem Echad is das elyon. We explained at length in the Maamer, where you have to learn it and review it and think about it when you say the Shema. Otherwise, what have we done? And that is the Isbon and Issa that belongs to V'ahavta. That's the 7 umas. That's what he says in the Zinyam of Edis Adam. Etchila yesh avedid misad das tachten. First, it starts with das tachten. Shema Yisrael Elokeinu. And then he unites it with das elyon havaya echad, as we learned in the Maamer, and that leads to v'ahavta. That leads to inspiration, and the negative loves and the fears and so on of the Zayin Umas are then channeled into Yiddishkeit and so on. And this is all expressed in the hisboneness that we say before Kriya Shema. Atu Hashem levadecha. How do you have this summary is only good after you learn the Maamer, otherwise it's just Reishis. So this is what he said, what we say, that the point is the yichud of das elyon and das tachten, which we devoted a lot of time to in the Maamer, and that's expressed in the words Atu hu Hashem levadecha. Ata sisas hashemayim, that's all das elyon, and levadecha going on atzmos. Again, Ata avay levadecha, that's atzmos shalamayim with base days. How do you unite the two? Drawing on atzmos. This is the whole discussion we're having. We are yes and we are not simultaneously. A Yid lives in the world of das tachten, but he brings the awareness of das elyon. We gave all the examples in Avodah of what that means, and we put out on the table. We wanted people to express their personal struggles with it, what it means for you personally. So it begins with Ata Hashem Levadecha, the unity of the two das elyon, das tachten is atzmus, and then it goes into Seata Sisas Shemayim, that's das elyon, and then it goes into the pasuk. This is just before Yishtabach. That's das tachten, and then Ata. And then it talks about Avram's avodah. Avram successfully united the two. And therefore, what's the result? You promised him the 7 ummahs. He conquered the heart. Sheti amshachel Yisrael dafket, it amshachel dafket Eden in Kedusha, mizbateles yinika zayin ummahs, and the nourishment to the 7 nations is neutralized. That's all the avodah of what the Parsha is showing. That's the avodah of Avram. That's the avodah of what of Ava. That's the avodah of his bonus. So first das tachten, then das elyon, and then the chibur of the two of them in the Elam Hazar Gashmi. Then it comes along Amalek Dafke at this point. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll continue the summary tomorrow, and then we'll continue. We'll stop Bez Hashem the new Maamer.